I just kind of was a journalist working in Irish TV and Irish radio, got a year off, went to Paris to do a thing called Journalists in Europe, and it was 1989, and the walls were coming down, the revolutions were happening, and I kind of discovered that when you went to these places and you rang up the Irish Times or you rang up RTE or whatever, and you said, hi, I'm in Timișoara, Romania, the Ceausescu's have just been executed, do you want 5 minutes on the radio or whatever, that you could actually make a living. So it was a bit of a sort of shock to me, really. I would never have survived now, because it's now understood that journalists are eyewitnesses to that first draft of history. And the thing is, Lucy, I came from Belfast. I understood ethnic cleansing. You know, I understood what it was like to be a Catholic growing up, completely separate from Protestants. I didn't know any Protestants. And actually, the most scared moment in my life was with a loyalist paramilitary called Johnny Adair. I was more frightened with him in the car in 2000 than the experience I had in Bosnia. He says to me, I said to him, have you ever had a Catholic in your, because he said to me, you're a Catholic, aren't you? And I said to him, well, have you ever had a Catholic in your car before? And he said, only a dead one.
Welcome to How to Have Extraordinary Relationships podcast with me, your host, Lucy Cavendish. And today I'm with Maggie O'Kane. And just so that you all know, for transparency, she's a really, really, really good friend of mine. And I've known her for a very long time. And I am an amazing admirer of what Maggie has done in the world. And I've asked her to come on the podcast. And we'll see where we get to. So she was a Guardian correspondent, set up Guardian Films. She's gone across the world, tracking down war criminals, meeting Nelson Mandela. She did Guardian Films, but now she is the executive director of the global media campaign to end female genital mutilation. So we're going to call it FGM, so everyone knows what we're talking about, FGM. And she does all sorts of work in that area that we're going to know about. It's something that's obviously incredibly important. It's something a lot of people don't know much about. So that's why she's here. But we're also going to ask her lots of questions, and maybe she'll answer some of them, maybe she won't. So Maggie, thank you for coming on. I know this is out of your comfort zone.
Well, thanks, Lucy. And actually, it is 30 years. Are we admitting to knowing each other for 30 years?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the first time I saw you, I think you were like 8 months pregnant, or have I got that wrong?
No, I wasn't pregnant yet. Probably about to be pregnant. I was in a pub, so hopefully I wasn't that pregnant. Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for having me. I just said before we started recording that it feels a bit strange talking to somebody you've known for so long, but I'm really happy to be here, and I'm doing it because I love Lucy, basically.
Thank you.
And I want to talk about FGM.
Yeah, which we're going to do. So when I first met you, I had heard of you. So for me, I mean, I'm nearly 60. For me, you were so pioneering as a woman in journalism. I think you had already tracked down, was it Mladic you tracked down? Ratko Mladic?
Karadzic, yeah. Bosnian War.
Yeah, and you were on the telly and you were in The Guardian, and I just remember thinking, how does she do it? So for me, you've always, and I've known you with your children and going off and doing all sorts of different things and working really hard and going to East Timor, which I think was, terrible, and trekking across the Tora Bora Mountains. And so for me, you've got a very big pioneering spirit and you're a doer. Would you agree with that?
Oh my God.
I mean, most people don't. Most people go to, including me, go to yoga classes and think, shall I change my
Well, I do that too. I do that.
Well, they don't think, shall I go and track down, some war criminals and do this?
Well, I mean, I'm 63, and I probably I did that in my through my 20s and 30s and maybe a bit into my 40s. But I mean, do you analyze yourself and say, yes, I'm a pioneering spirit, or that's what I do? I don't think you do. I just think it's what you do. And I think being a foreign correspondent with The Guardian was, almost by accident. I just kind of was a journalist working in Irish TV and Irish radio, got a year off, went to Paris to do a thing called Journalists in Europe. And it was 1989, and the walls were coming down, the revolutions were happening. And I kind of discovered that when you went to these places and you rang up the Irish Times or you rang up RTE or whatever, and you said, "Hi, I'm in Timișoara, Romania. The Ceausescus have just been executed. Do you want 5 minutes on the radio or whatever?" That you could actually make a living. So it was a bit of a sort of shock to me, really. And I did that for 3 years until finally the Guardian gave me a job. So it wasn't like I set out to say I'm going to be a pioneering spirit. I thought this is really interesting, and you can actually make a living off it. And I was supposed to go back to Irish TV, where I was working as a reporter, and I met the male editor of the program that I was working in, and he had kind of seen me running around filing for different places and doing my thing. And I remember his words to me in the corridor outside one of the studios. I said, "Oh, sure, Maggie, we'll soon knock you back into shape." And I thought, actually, I don't really want to be knocked back into shape. I maybe just keep going.
So you grew up in the Republic of Ireland, didn't you? You're from the Republic. Were you a kind of naughty school girl? Were you were you the one that was always off doing projects and asking questions? Because what I know of you is your very active mind. I mean, people tell you stuff and you question it and you think about it and you work out how to, what does that mean? I mean, were you like that as a kid?
I think what happened to me, in a way, I was a kind of refugee from Belfast. In 1974, when things were getting rough in Belfast, my father was a former RUC man. And being a former RUC man, and he was a Catholic, which was very unusual, the youngest of five brothers who nearly disowned him for joining the RUC. So my father, we kind of left North Belfast because actually he was probably at risk, and went down to North County Dublin to Skerries. And I was kind of completely lost there. I didn't want to leave Belfast. I was unhappy. So then I think I became a little bit difficult and mitching school and all those things, and kind of maybe was a little bit out there. But I think that came out of unhappiness when I was like 12, 13, 14. That's not really answering your question. I'm
Well,
just
it is. So that's the age you left Belfast. So you weren't like little. You were, because obviously I knew your father, who's an amazing man, and I knew that had been in the RUC, that it had been difficult. So you were a teenager when you left Belfast.
Yeah, and we went to a small seaside town in North County Dublin called Skerries. There were 5 kids. My father had become a teacher, and it's a bad age to move. I think that sort of 12, 13. So it took me quite a while to settle down in Loretto Convent, Balbriggan, where I went to school, which was a very sort of strict, traditional Irish Catholic convent school. And yeah, it was fine. We were happy, I would say. But I couldn't kind of wait to get out of Skerries and wait to get into Dublin to the big smoke when I was 17. So I moved into Dublin then and started college.
So much. I mean, it's interesting that our children don't do that so much. I mean, my friends say I left school, I left home at 16, I left home at 17. What did you do? And you went to college in Dublin, and were you doing journalism then? Did you get interested in journalism when you were in college?
Well, actually, I hadn't set out to be a journalist. I'd wanted to do law, and I just had missed the entrance by a point. I was devastated. And I was standing at the bus stop with my friend Anne Casson, who was going out to the College of Commerce, Rathmines, to do a course there. And she said, "Oh, why don't you come with me and see what's going?" So I went out to Rathmines, and the long and the short of it was there was only one journalism school in Ireland at the time, the College of Commerce, Rathmines, and they took 20 students. And for somehow I managed to get a place on that. So my choice was going to UCD to join like 600 other first year art students to do politics and history, or to do the journalism course. So I thought, oh, I'll do the journalism course. So it was, if I hadn't been standing at the 24 bus with Anne Casson, then none of this might have happened.
And it seemed really possible then. I mean, because obviously, one of the most extreme situations you've been in. I mean, I've been to Timișoara in Romania. I mean, what on earth are you? I mean, I happened to be there, but not during a revolution. I mean, what on earth made you go to Timișoara?
Well, basically in 1989, the wall came down, and by accident, I was in Berlin. and there was no Irish news reporters there, so I was basically borrowing cameras from other the BBC, and doing pieces to camera, and after Berlin, I realized you could actually just report. So I just followed the revolutions, to the Czech Republic as Prague was happening, and then on to Romania, but I mean, in terms of sort of dangerous situations, I think probably East Timor was the most dangerous, in that I was on a motorbike when that, as you know, that was the uprising against the Indonesian government, and the UN were there. Marie Colvin, the fantastically brave and now dead foreign correspondent, was there. And basically I was, and this is where you think you really need to grow up, but I there was no way to get around, so I was on a motorbike, and I felt something go past my ear, and when I got to the military center, the policeman there, not the Australian military guy, said it was like a pop. He said, that is so close. The bullet was so close that it popped the air inside my ear. And I think that's probably the closest. Although looking back on Bosnia, again, I think I covered that for The Guardian, but initially as a freelancer. And again, I think really kind of naive. I call it sort of the Pollyanna phase, where you sort of felt a bit invincible. I was 28 at the time, 29, behind the lines, going into areas that had been ethnically cleansed long before the war crimes tribunals came out, and a couple of months ago or last June actually, I was in Sarajevo with one of the war crimes prosecutors, who said to me, looking back, the places that you were, for example, Zvornik, which was a mass killing site, over 5,000 civilians had been executed there just sort of the week after I'd been there, and I had been with the Serb militia that had carried that out. Now, given the war crimes tribunals, given The Hague, I would never have survived now, because it's now understood that journalists are eyewitnesses to that first draft of history. But I think they were kind of amused by me, or I don't know. I mean, I look back and I read through the reports of the war crimes, and think I'm lucky I did survive, and I think I was pretty naive.
I mean, there's so many questions on us. Do you think it's because you were a woman? Do you think it's because you were something about being Irish? Maybe it's none of those things. I mean, I mean, I've been there. They're big men, scary.
I think, first of all, I think you're a woman, so you're less of a threat. Secondly, I did do one smart thing everywhere that I went. I immediately attached myself to the commander, and the commander would generally be better educated and know that it's probably not a good idea to disappear, for anybody to hurt me. So I became, in a way, I became his. I was in his orbit. So I mean, I didn't stay around too long. I would just like maybe be around 24 hours, 48 hours. But the kind of the thugs, and there were a lot of thugs there, because basically Milosevic opened the prisons, and these were the Serbian militia. They understood enough to know that I was with the commander, and I didn't stay around long enough to really get into trouble. But I think mainly I was a woman. I was quite young. They didn't quite know what to make of me. But again, I think looking back on it, it was very naive. I think if I'd been a man in that situation, it would have been different.
What, you think they would have just shot you?
I think they would have been more suspicious, and they wouldn't have been sort of showing off, and they wouldn't have trying to be nice. It's just the dynamics of that particular war were one that it was just easier. It was just easier. And then the journalists started being killed. Most of the first of those that were killed were men. And now I look back, and Marie Colvin was killed in Syria nearly 10 years ago. I mean, and we've seen what's happened in Gaza. I mean, being a journalist is absolutely no protection. But then it was different, Then it was, you did have some protection.
Did you ever feel sexually threatened? Did you ever think, oh my God, they're going to, I mean, sorry to say this, but rape me or abuse me?
No,
Yeah, it's interesting.
no, I didn't. I always felt like I'm trying to really think back. I haven't. I can honestly say I never felt that. I never felt that.
And you found Karadzic, or maybe he wasn't hiding. I mean, that became quite a moment, didn't it?
Well, he wasn't hiding then. He was the Bosnian Serb leader. He was talking about, carving up Yugoslavia. The people couldn't live together. Um, the Croats and the Serbs needed to live. This was the whole ethnic cleansing and the whole separation of Yugoslavia. And the thing is, Lucy, I came from Belfast. I understood ethnic cleansing. I understood what it was like to be a Catholic growing up, completely separate from Protestants. I didn't know any Protestants. And actually, the most scared moment in my life was with a loyalist paramilitary called
Wow.
Johnny Adair. I was more frightened with him in the car in 2000 than the experience I had in Bosnia. So, in the heart of me, there was a little Fenian Catholic girl who understood that Catholics and Protestants were separated. How did I get onto that point?
Karadzic. Yeah. So hang on, just
Karadzic. Yeah. So just quickly on that.
Yeah.
On you.
So let me just. So actually, it was very frightening with the with the lawyers because he knew who you were. Whereas Karadzic couldn't really place you. Maybe he didn't really know who is this young Irish girl puddling about, Bosnia, asking questions.
Yes. And also, I suppose what the point I was going to make was I understood, looking at Karadzic, she was talking about ethnic cleansing and a separation of communities. I thought, I'm a girl from Belfast, Yugoslavia these are all Tito's children here. These people have lived together for generations. So it's what you're talking is complete rubbish. So I felt really strongly about covering Yugoslavia because I could see the sort of lies, because I had come from a sectarian community. But then to go back to the issue about Johnny Adair. So Johnny Adair was a loyalist paramilitary who has so what am I? He's convicted for orchestrating terrorism. He was a major target for the police. He was and has not been convicted of various crimes of which he's accused, including the murder of Catholics. So his conviction, as I say, was for directing terrorism. But he was a feared figure in Belfast. And when I went to interview him, my access to him was via somebody who was supported Crusaders Football Club, which my father had supported, and my father had played for Crusaders, which was a Protestant club. So by a really long way, I ended up interviewing this guy who was quite terrifying. And I tried to make light of it. So we're sort of driving down the Falls Road, and he says to me, I said to him, have you ever had a Catholic in your? Because he said to me, "You're a Catholic, aren't you?" And I said to him, "Well, have you ever had a Catholic in your car before?" And he said, "Only a dead one."
Ooh.
So that's a bit of a conversation stopper, really. So yeah, that's really scared me. That's when I felt really scared.
Yes, that is. I mean, you ended up living back. I know we leave you back in Belfast.
Yeah.
How did he know you were a Catholic? Because I mean, as you know, the father of my eldest son, who is a Protestant, and he said everyone just knows. And I'm like, but how do you know? How do you know that person standing over there is a Catholic and that person standing over is a Protestant?
Well, it's names, really. Maggie O'Kane. That's a real Catholic name. I couldn't hide that. And I mean, that's the first thing you do actually in sectarian Belfast in the 70s and the 80s. It's like, what school did you go to was a way of saying whether you were Catholic or Protestant. So, yeah, that was Johnny. And then actually, I went back there. My husband became the Ireland correspondent for the Guardian, and I realized then that I was still frightened. Because after this big article came out about Johnny Adair, and it was on the front of the Guardian, and it was a G2 cover, and the special branch came and interviewed me in the editor's office with the lawyers and said, basically we're looking for information. And then they picked him up quite soon after that, and there was a new charge was somehow invented, which was orchestrating terrorism. So Johnny Adair was very angry, and actually the message was not to go back to Belfast. So when I ended up 5 years later living there, or maybe 9 years later, living there with my husband and my small boy, Billy, who you also know, things were still unsettled there. And I remember one night feeling desperately sort of scared. I don't know what scared me. And I remember picking up Billy and with Sharifa, who was our au pair who'd come from Afghanistan, and actually checking myself into a hotel because I just felt incredibly vulnerable. So I don't know what to say about that now.
Yeah,
But anyway.
interesting. But it's interesting that actually you felt more vulnerable, because I know all the things that you've done. I know you've walked across, was it the Tora Bora Mountains?
Hindu Kush.
The Hindu Kush. You know, I mean, the stories of the stories of the things that you've done, I was like, God almighty, and trying to get lifts on American helicopters, and people that were good to you and people that were, I mean, lots of people weren't very good to you because you were asking questions. A lot of them, I mean, we don't need to name names, but I imagine it's hard being in the press corps. I imagine it's hard, when you see movies, as everyone's trying to get the story and everyone's trying to outstory everybody else, and who's getting a lift on the copter and who isn't. Does it feel like that?
I mean, one of the sort of sad things, and one of the reasons I'm glad I'm not, I stopped doing what I was doing, is that as I was in the Iraq War and the Bosnian War and all those, the military became very clever about kind of organizing what was called the pool, which would be, people would be selected to report back to the others about what was happening. And it became a very sort of unseemly scramble, me, can I go on the pool? Can I go on the helicopter? And actually the problem with the pool and the helicopter was that you never got any information. It's a bit like, going into the White House. Everybody's there getting the same stuff. So,
Yeah.
The thing that I was good at, because I had to make a living as a freelance, was, not being part of the pool, not being on the helicopter. And, what you discovered then was, when you walked away from the pool and kind of went round the back and kind of talked to a few of the soldiers. I mean, I used to get lifts on helicopters from the American military. Sky King Stacy took me up because they were kind of bored, and somebody wanders around and they're not really a threat. And I just discovered there is loads of ways to get around. But as the years went on, it just became impossible to actually move, and it also became much more dangerous. Now I just I look at somewhere like Gaza, and I think all of the reporting that's come out of that has come out from people with cameras inside, but it's impossible. I mean, some people have tried really hard. Jeremy Bowen's amazing. There's been Lise Doucette, there's been amazing work, but it's just really hard to do a decent job now. And also, we're less necessary, Lucy. Everyone's got a camera, and everyone's there, so we're a bit obsolete.
And also waving the white flag, of journalism doesn't, as you've said, I mean, no one cares anymore. You're still a target. That's changed, hasn't it?
Totally, yeah. And I mean, the other thing is, I mean, I stopped being a good foreign correspondent when I think Billy was born. And I continued for about 4 years after that, 5 years. Because I became too terrified that I'd get picked up or I'd get arrested. Or before I was like, let's go, but I was going away for 6 weeks when he was small, when he was 6 months old, when he was a year old, literally with I'd been breastfeeding, engorged breasts, and then I was just kind of miserable. I couldn't keep doing that. And I also had a number of miscarriages, which I just mention because I think the thing about miscarriages is, for me, I realized a lot of people had them and they didn't really talk about them, and I had 5. So and some of them were quite early, but I don't know, sometimes it's useful for women to know that other women have had miscarriages. And then I went on to have 2 other children, so I just want to share that, because at the time that they were happening, as you'll know, I thought it was the end of the world and I'd never have another baby. So
yeah, and thank you for sharing that, because I mean, a lot of people are beginning to talk about it, but I know people don't talk about it, which is really painful and difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, you were meeting these people who were committing horrific. I know you also horrific atrocities, like Karadzic. And I mean, what do you do with that? Do you say to them, what the hell is wrong with you? I mean, what are you actually doing? You know, you're getting people to rape women. I mean, why are you doing this? Do you?
Well, I remember interviewing Vojislav Šešelj, who was the one of the worst of the Serbian paramilitary leaders, and ran an organization called the White Eagles. It wasn't an organization; it was a paramilitary killing gang, really. And I interviewed him for a documentary for Channel 4, and I look back on that piece. You know, there's an exchange with him where I'm saying to him, you know what your men have done. You know they've been raping women. You know about the mass killings, and he's kind of completely denied it all. And so in the end, I ended up saying, I just feel ill just even talking to you. And then he said quite rightly, well, then get a doctor. I mean, as a journalist, that's pretty bad. That at the end of it, the best thing I can manage to say is, you make me feel ill. I did try very hard to put all the accusations to him. So, I mean, your job, I suppose, is to just try and gather the evidence and try and get to these people and put it to them and seek some sort of accountability.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember talking to you, like, how did you survive this? You're in Sarajevo, you're in lots of difficult places, and you said to me, hot water, did you say hot water bottle?
Candles.
And a candle.
Yeah.
If I missed something else.
Hot water bottle and a candle, actually. But particularly the candles.
Yes.
Little tea lights that no matter how horrible a room you're staying in. And I remember my worst room was in Niger in Africa, and I was in a place called Niamey, and we were doing a thing about 1 in 5 children were dying. 1 in 5 children were dying under the age of 5 from diseases that they shouldn't die from, and I just remember having the candles all around, but also I heard this click, 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 click in this horrible, horrible hotel that nobody else was in. And I looked around and I could see the back of little big cockroaches trying to come in under the door. So they'd obviously seen the candlelight. So, but anyway, candles, yeah.
So let's just see. So a couple of funny things happened. You had Peter Mandelson around for dinner. I remember that.
Oh, right.
Did you have Peter Mandelson around for dinner when you were in Belfast?
Yeah, so my husband was the Ireland correspondent for The Guardian, as I said, and Peter Mandelson actually was then the Northern Ireland Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. It's kind of invited himself around, to be fair, and so I remember him coming with his dog Bobby, and I'm thinking, what do you give the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland? And I realized I didn't really have anything much in my repertoire, so I made him fish pie, and then for dessert that was just too much. So I got a Viennetta.
I like that. Yeah.
So he was very appreciative, actually.
And what do you think of him, or is it just too long ago?
Well, so, I mean, he was very, there's a reason why Peter Mandelson was such a great success. Is he's a very charming man. He didn't seem to like my husband very much because he wasn't giving him the kind of coverage that he expected, and but he was very happy to chatter to me about Bosnia. So I have to say, he was charming. But I mean, he was. There's a lot of talent there, despite everything that's happened.
Yes. And the other thing that I know is you ended up at Nelson Mandela's. You were invited, weren't you, to Nelson Mandela's birthday party? Is that birthday celebration?
No, it was. There was a thing at the Johannesburg University just after Nelson Mandela was released, or maybe it was 5 years after that, and they just asked me to come and speak about the Bosnian War. And I remember saying to John, I said, "Oh God, I don't know. How could you go and stand beside Nelson Mandela and anyway, I did, and I had a green trouser suit on, and he spoke, and I just thought, this is a high point of my life, and it remains a high point of my life to be in the presence of such greatness, really.
Yeah. So let's move. So there's a lot in there. We could talk phases, but we really want to get on to what you're doing now. So, what I know and what you've said, you went to East Timor, the bullet whizzes by your ear. You've had Billy at this point, who's now nearly 30, because we had our
Yeah.
baby at the same time. And you said in that moment, you were like, actually, I can't do this. I can't.
Well, it wasn't it really even in that moment. I mean, East Timor, I was still sort of I think that was pre-Billy. Yeah, it definitely was pre-Billy. I think what really did it for me is I did that last climb over the Hindu Kush into Afghanistan, and before that I'd had 5 miscarriages. I covered that, and then I went back and was lucky enough to get pregnant with my daughter Ruby, who's now 24, and this fetus looked like it was going to hang in there. And that was just at the time when Alan Rusbridger, who was then, no, so I had Ruby and went on maternity leave, and then the second Gulf War started. And I remember Alan Rusbridger, who was then the editor of The Guardian and a great editor to me, calling me in and saying, how do you feel about going back to Baghdad? And I remember saying, I'm breastfeeding and I don't have anything more to prove. No
Good for
thanks.
you.
I just felt, I suppose I'd spent years sort of, I think maybe we all do, or maybe I did, just trying to kind of, you're proving yourself and you could do it. I just felt I was done. And also a very good friend of mine who's currently in hospital in Dublin said to me, if you keep doing dangerous things long enough, the logic is you get killed in the end. And maybe I had seen too many people around me, like Kurt Schork was a good friend, killed in Sierra Leone. Afterwards, Marie Colvin was bombed in Syria. So I just kind of felt like my luck had run out. And also I just didn't want to do it again.
Do you think there's a pathology to it? That kind of, what is it? Anthony, is it Lane?
Anthony Lloyd, yeah.
Anthony Lloyd did My Lovely War, How I Miss It. So, that thing of it becomes really addictive. The fear, the adrenaline, the doing good, the reporting, the putting yourself in really dangerous situations.
I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing, especially if you can say, this is worthwhile reporting on, or you can, I covered the Bosnian camps. I was part of uncovering those camps. I mean, to do something that's exciting, where you can smoke and drink nonstop, you can hang out with a bunch of really cool people, and you can feel like you're doing something worthwhile. It's an amazing career to have, but then you just get too old for it. And then as a mother, and this is very personal to me, I think other women will feel different. Women are still war correspondents. I think maybe if Marie had had kids, which she wanted to very much, I don't know if she would have kept going. I can only say for me, I felt like my mind and my brain changed, and my hypothalamus was changed by whatever was going on in my body. And you have to kind of trust your instinct.
Yeah, I think you do. I think it's important. So you went and did Guardian Films, which was sort of an early adopter, where you were here and home and still part of the Guardian. And just, I mean, I kind of remember that before you started doing that, there was all sorts of there's always tensions, isn't there, in newspapers of who's doing well and who does she think she is and all that stuff. And I think you'd got to a stage of going, I want to do something else.
Well, I mean, I was looking for a way of. Can you hear those dishes? Can you hear the noise in the background?
No, I can't.
Guardian Films. I mean, Guardian Films. I was living in Edinburgh, and John was working for the Scotsman. It was the deputy editor, and I had noticed that Corriola del Sera had set up a film unit. And I just thought, the Guardian has all this amazing content, all these great journalists. Why don't we set up a film unit? So I went to then Carolyn McCall, who was the CEO then, and proposed it to her and said, this could be the early video. And I think we were ahead of our time.
Yeah,
That was
definitely.
before lots of newspapers were
Mm.
doing video. And to be fair, there wasn't much resistance. There was a lot of talk about should videos be shorter. What was the kind of thing that worked with newspapers. And I was coming from a documentary background, so we were making documentaries. Maybe that wasn't the best thing that the Guardian needed to do then, but I think we did some really good stuff. And it was, I think, Lucy, if you've been kind of almost like a lone ranger in the field, which I was, and the Guardian was amazing. Go and find out what's happening. Paul Webster, who was my foreign editor at the time, giving me a brief, which was, there are thousands of people fleeing from, at that time, central Bosnia. Go and find out what's happening, and take 2 weeks. I mean, that would never happen now.
No.
And maybe it's, yeah, whatever. So, but when you've been a lone ranger like that, it's very hard to go back into the newsroom. And I think I probably never fitted in the newsroom anyway. So Guardian Films was kind of a way to be innovative and explorative and use all those skills. And it was fun. And my great friend Jackie Timberlake, I was at her going away do on last Thursday night after 24 years. So it was 24 years
Yes.
ago when we did that.
Yes. But then you left and you started your new life working with trying to eradicate FGM. So tell us about that transition and what your life looks like now, and what tell us everything we need to know.
Yeah. So the transition to FGM wasn't a direction I expected to go in, and it just happened. I'd made a film for Guardian Films about FGM in Kenya, and I'm like, what? Like what? That girls are getting their genitalia hacked off with razor blades.
Yeah.
And it's happening to 240 million girls and women are living on the planet with this. And so I was completely sort of baffled by this practice. And I was also completely baffled, having been a war correspondent and seen the use of radio to kind of incite wars in Bosnia and in Rwanda, and the power of local radio and the propaganda wars. I was thinking, why aren't the same tactics being used to get rid of FGM? And so then I went on a meditation retreat, actually, for 3 or 4 days, as I've been doing for 20 years. And it just really kept playing in my mind, what's going on? How can we stop this? And then I remember going into Guardian conference. I'm sure you know what conferences are like, Lucy. It's sort of, everyone sits around and the whole staff.
Yeah.
They're awful, and they're kind of scary, and the men speak more and the posh boys speak more, and you're always intimidated. And suddenly I hear myself saying, it was after the Edward Snowden affair, and it had been the phone hacking and all of that was in the news. And I remember saying, suddenly, Alan Rosebridge said, is there anything else? And I said, yes. I know. I said, well, the way we've just done this massive campaign on phone hacking. And he said, yes. And I said, well, 240 million girls and women have had their genitals hacked off. Shouldn't we have been doing a campaign on that? That's the kind of thing
that's so not funny, but I can just imagine exactly, the Crispins and the Tristans going, what? Like, oh, women, genitalia, ow, no.
Well, it wasn't the Crispins and the Tristans and the Pauls. And I catch out of the side of my eye the formidable news editor, and just in time to see him throwing his eyes up to heaven. And that was a general sort of frisson of embarrassment around the whole place. And I thought, well, I've said my bit. I've said it. I've done my thing. I've said it. And I went back to my desk rather glumly, and I'm sitting there, and I remember there was like a stack of those grey metal filing cabinets, and suddenly over the head of them looms Rusbridger, who's an editor, and he said, Maggie, let's talk more about this. Let's talk more about this. So basically, he decided that we were going to launch a campaign at The Guardian about FGM. And so we launched a campaign, and the campaign was to get FGM taught in every single school in the UK. The thing was that this campaign ran for about 2 months. We got thousands and thousands of signatures. We launched it again in the US. And then we discovered that the figures for FGM in the UK had been hugely exaggerated, because they were based on if 90% of girls in Somalia were cut, then 90% of girls among the diaspora were also cut. So therefore there were 90% of Somali girls living in Holloway who were also cut. Not true. So we did lots of investigations, couldn't find anybody who was being cut in the UK, and realized that actually this whole campaign, and I put my head in my hands, was based on a focus on the UK, and that's where we shouldn't be focusing on. It was actually in Africa.
Yeah.
So that, to be fair to The Guardian, that was a really cool, brave thing to do. And then basically a big philanthropist saw the campaign in The Guardian and put £1 million on the table. And he said, I said, we want to take it to Africa. And that's what we did.
That must have been a difficult moment when you had to say, oh, the figures aren't stacking up in the way that I thought they were.
Well, to be honest, it's the first time I've admitted to it, Lucy, exclusively on your podcast. But I mean, I've said it many times. It's just there was a huge what happens in sometimes within NGOs and charities, that people sometimes figures can be exaggerated. I mean, I finally tracked down the researcher who did that work, and I said, you know that it can't be the same among the diaspora as so how did you use that methodology? And she said, well, that was the methodology that was existed and was approved. So I don't come from academia, and as a journalist I finally got to the source of it and realized that actually, there's a huge problem in Africa, with over 90% of girls still being cut in lots of countries like Somalia and Kenya. And that's where our focus of our work should be. So that's when we moved to supporting frontline women's organizations there, to use the radio, to use the TV, to run caravans from village to village, just bringing the information.
So, I mean, that's been, as far as I know, from all your posts on LinkedIn, and we'll tell people how to find you and how to find this, a big success. But I having been on holiday with you, I mean, you worked hard, honey. We were on holiday, and I was like, I've got to do a call, I've got to do this. And you were trying to get someone in to a banquet to sit next to Macron. There's a lot of energy that you have to put into that. And what you've said to me is, it's about, financing this. So finding people that can sponsor stuff. Is that right? That the main thing is to try and keep the going and get it into the consciousness of people, but it's mainly about the people who are doing the cutting and the women who are being cut, isn't it?
I mean, the thing is, as you started this chat saying, people don't know very much about FGM, and what I learned in the last 12 years, that if you want to end something, that the people that are going to end it are the frontline women everywhere are the people who fight and make things happen. Okay. So in between all of that, you've got the UN agencies, you've got the private consultancies, you've got governments, you've got intersectionality, you've got all the theory behind development. At the end of the day, if you fund women who are on the front line, they just get the job done. So it's taken us 12 years to learn that if you get a caravan of a couple of trucks and a flatbed truck and a big screen, and you bring the religious leaders and you bring the doctors and you bring the survivors on the back of the truck into the villages, because people have got no capacity to travel, and you tell people about the dangers of FGM to their daughters, that people stop. And you tell them it's not a religious, not us. The religious leaders tell them it's not a religious obligation. The doctors tell them your daughter is going to more likely to die in childbirth because she's been sewn up so tightly. People don't know this. It's been going on for 4,000 years. They just think this is normal. So when you bring that information into a village, you can change people's minds. So we've just done it in Sierra Leone. It reached 17,000 people. It cost less than $40,000, and 60% of those people who were there in those villages have said they've changed their minds about FGM. It is the world's most winnable problem. Have I said that before? I don't want to sound like a cliche, but it absolutely is. And so it's really frustrating when you see that less than 3% of funding actually reaches those women. It's all gets siphoned off on the way down. So our job is just to get money. And you're saying to me, I somehow have to find 20,000 a month to keep this thing going in the countries. I don't know. That's why I wake up at night, and I've stopped waking up. You just have to believe in it, and believe that now more and more governments are thinking this is the way to do this. You go through somebody like the global media campaign, and the other thing we've done, we measure impact all the time. So lots of interventions, they don't measure impact. We measure impact, and it breaks your heart. And we use 20% of our funding to keep measuring and keep making sure this is getting through, and keep whatever. So I think things are changing. I think the kind of irony of USAID closing and all of that money being lost is that governments are looking for much more efficient ways to actually eradicate this practice. And they're sick to death of putting millions into big agencies and it not reaching the grassroots.
Yeah. So actually, although I know that must have been difficult because of the US stopping funding for things, that there is an, it means for you're a smaller agency that you can show the results of what you're doing.
Yeah, and to really underline it, what Trump did with USAID is an absolute disaster that has led to so many deaths. Particularly for the antiretroviral drugs. I mean, it's a catastrophe. But in the area of FGM, which they didn't really fund, it's meant that there is a focus on value for money because there's a lot less money around. So all governments are saying we need to make things. We need to do things that actually can be done for $10 a girl. It's really pretty cheap and efficient. So we're one of the few people I can say have USAID closing. They didn't fund us anyway because they funded a lot of the bigger organizations, and has not been a disaster.
And you have the Born Perfect campaign, which I think is a really, it's beautiful. The hashtag Born Perfect, which I think is a beautiful way of putting it.
Yeah. So I mean, when these caravans go into the village, they go in with joy. They go in to celebrate the girl child and say she's born perfect. So it's not finger wagging, it's information about how to protect your daughter. It's a celebration. There's always musicians on it. And then they sign the Born Perfect pledge to recognize that their daughter is born perfect. And, I always think about this. I'm not from the development world. I'm a journalist, but, people talk all the time about, it's a deeply embedded social norm, cutting girls. But actually the strongest social norm there is to love your children. Yeah. So in a way, this campaign is tapping into the Born Perfect campaign is tapping into loving your child. And when it's exposed, and this is what we do with religious leaders who are pro FGM or politicians who are pro FGM, we invite them to see what it is. And I've watched men running out of rooms in tears because it's all hidden. So when those converts get on the truck and say your girls are born perfect, we don't need to cut anymore, that great social norm of love for your children just comes to the top. And that's why this is easy to do, with not much money. And so support the campaign, keep the caravans rolling. I mean, they're rolling in 5 countries now, and we're just about to go into Somalia. And not we, but the frontline organizations. We've just, this morning before I came on with you, we're just talking with these 3 frontline organizations who've got hardly any funding. And now suddenly they've got 70,000 to actually hire the trucks, bring the doctors, go from village to village, because the law is being passed in Somalia that FGM should be over, but nobody knows. So you have to take that into the village.
You don't get the information, but amazing the law's being passed.
Yeah, well, in 2 counties it's been passed, so there is progress being made, and so it's really exciting, actually, Lucy. I have to say, you know, it's more exciting than all those bucks in their flak jackets in Bosnia. I mean, this has been the most exciting and rewarding work because you actually see results. I mean, the sort of difficult thing about covering wars is you feel overwhelmed by the hopelessness of it all. You know, especially now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas this feels like this can be done. You know.
It's amazing. So
Amazing.
how can people find you, get involved? Just give us some pointers if people are interested in your work and what you're doing, not just you, obviously the whole,
Yeah.
the whole
So
campaign.
www.globalmediacampaign.org. That's the name of the website, and there you can see the caravans. www.globalmediacampaign.org. You can see the caravans going village to village. You can see the impact studies. You can, get in contact and just get behind these women. You know, it's like it should be a global feminist movement, really. You know, we should all of us should be involved in stopping this, and yeah, all of us.
Yeah. So there's so much we could talk about, but we have to come to an end. Do you think you're ever going to stop, or do you think you'll be, actively campaigning and writing and,
Well, actually, last week I'm going to drop names. We went to see the Irish and the Norwegian government about funding this approach, and I met the ex-Irish president, Mary Robinson, who's supporting us. He's amazing.
Yeah,
He's amazing.
Amazing.
Amazing woman, and so she's going to launch the campaign in Ireland in October. And she was, I said to her, do you ever? She's 81, and I said to her, do you ever, how do you keep going? And she said, well, her father said to her that it's better to wear out than rust out. Now, I'm not sure I completely agree with that. I don't want to wear out, but I think it's when you're involved in something that really you can see a difference, it's kind of hard to leave behind. And I'd like to slow it down a bit, but I can't see myself leaving this because it's so much progress so quickly, and it's exciting. And also, you know what? You work with incredible people. You know, the women who are fighting this in the front line are just amazing work colleagues, amazing people to be around. So it's very, very rich for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lucy. Thanks a lot.
And it's been fascinating. So many different points. So please, everyone that's listening, get involved, look it up, get involved with whatever, just share it on LinkedIn if that's what helps. Thank you so much, Maggie.
Thanks a lot, Lucy.